But as we move on to our round wrap up, just want to take a look at the current finals picture right now. As it stands, the top eight goes Melbourne, Doggies, Geelong, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, Sydney, West Coast, and Richmond. 9 and 10, and really the two teams that had the best chance, I guess Fremantle is tied with Essendon in points. So Freo is right there at 11, but realistically, not as much. The two teams more than likely that will make it in, that are in the top eight right now, is GWS and Essendon. GWS 26, Essendon 24, and the two teams most likely to drop out is the 7-8 team in West Coast and Richmond. West Coast being at 32 points, Richmond being at 28 points. So, Donnie, out of those, let's focus on the two teams in the top eight still. Out of between West Coast and Richmond, which team do you think is more likely to drop out of the top eight?
Oh, I love how you phrase that question because if you listen to footy media, there's a team the team you missed is the one everybody talks about, and I'm gonna bring them in. Okay, the Sydney Swans are the one everybody's talking about
I don't
being the
believe it.
team that's gonna drop out, and your facial expression shows the same kind of disdain I have for it because I think way too many people are focused on that Hawthorn loss and how it looked
Mm-hmm.
to kind of
Optically,
gauge
it was a very bad loss, but look at the history of those
100%.
teams. Look at the history
100
of those teams.
100% agree with you. But as I stated that day, Hawthorne's coming off the bye week. They had
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks to prepare for Sydney. Sydney had been playing previously. They looked tired midway through the second quarter. This Port game coming up this week, I think, is absolutely crucial. If
Mm-hmm.
Sydney can go into Adelaide and get 4 points, that's going to make most of the media response to them, I think, is going to then flip it on Port
Mm.
because I think whoever on it, like I said, I'm not trying to change your question, but West Coast is getting healthier.
Yes.
Shuey's coming back soon, and I think they're still going to get at least 4 games at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think West Coast is going to do enough to stay in. Richmond, it's the same thing.
It's Richmond all the time, man.
Unfortunately,
You can't
they are
count
kind of
Richmond no matter what.
they're the zombie that you can't seem to shoot in the head.
Right.
Unfortunately, they just keep coming. Unfortunately, yes, they have the 4 points back from West Coast in Sydney, but honestly, I'm going to state it now, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here. I think the loser of the Sydney Swans Port Adelaide game is much more ripe
Mm-hmm.
to fall out
Mm.
than West Coast and Richmond,
Mm.
as I see it currently. Again,
Just
Richmond
wait till we
really
get to our tipping, I guess. Gotta stick around till the end of the show.
Richmond really doesn't have that difficult to run. If I remember correctly, I think they only play Brisbane and Geelong, and that's it when it comes to the top
Mm-hmm.
8 sides the rest of the year.
I think the
So
biggest game besides Brisbane and Geelong, I do want to point out their second to last game of the year is going to be against GWS at Giant Stadium. So that is going to be a
exactly.
huge, extremely pivotal game, more than
And
likely.
and here's the other thing many of the media are pointing out. Sydney's next 3 games are against fifth, seventh, and second currently in the ladder as we speak. But here's the one thing most of those Melbourne media seem to always forget. After that game against the Western Bull, after their last game, which is against the Western Bulldogs, all they play is GWS in ninth, and everybody else
Hey,
is
what you mean
10th.
is all you play?
When it
Just
comes
messing
when
with
it
you.
they only have 3 of their last 8 games, or 3 of their last 9 games are against teams in the top 8, which
Mm-hmm.
by discussion are usually tougher games.
I mean,
Again,
Sydney
I'm
could
not
easily go they could go 4-4, and they could make the finals.
exactly, and
Yeah.
that's and but this 3 game set here with Port, West Coast, and home, and then back to Victoria for the Western Bulldogs. If I'm a Sydney supporter, if you can go 1 and 2 out of those 3, it's a win because most people are already saying lost to Port, lost to West Coast, lost to Western Bulldogs. I can almost guarantee because they see the Hawthorn result.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, again, because they're paging the Sydney Swans of the Hawthorn game. I don't think they're going to see. I don't think Port's going to get the Sydney Swans that play the Hawthorn Hawks. I don't think so. I think they're going to get a fresher, more active, much healthier team. In fact, I think Chad Warner should be back for that game, and there's even potentially Errol Goulden could be back
Mm-hmm.
for this game if he gets in the roster. We will have to see again. That'll all just kind of goes how training goes in Sydney. But I think the loser of the Port Sydney game. I will not say who my tip is as of right now.
Gotta
I,
save that till then.
I
Just
will
make sure
not.
to keep
I'll say
listening.
that for later. Now go outside, ninth and 10th.
Mm-hmm.
GWS Essendon. Frio fans, I love you, but I don't know if you have enough offense to make up the 12-point deficit you have in percentage to Essendon.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you're going to get in right now. I'd love to see you be there. I just don't know if you have the offense to be able to get there. So I'm not trying to put a line through you, Frio, but I'm going to just for this discussion. Essendon, GWS, which team gets in? Unfortunately, Essendon's next two games are very, very difficult. Geelong, Melbourne. Unfortunately, I just don't know if you have enough strength to beat those two teams. They're playing really, really well, and not getting 8 points in these next two games could be critical because you
Mm-hmm.
could fall even further behind GWS if GWS win, which I think they have a really, really good shot of getting a couple victories over the next two rounds, especially with Hawthorn coming up this week. So honestly, I think GWS is the only team right now outside of the eight that I think that could potentially get in. It'll just kind of depend on their schedule. Again, they have Hawthorn this week, and then they have Melbourne. So it's kind of one win, one loss
Mm-hmm.
potentially. You just don't know what Melbourne team are you going to go get. Are you going to be getting after that? And then you have the Sydney Derby in round 18 with the Sydney Swans, which again could be absolutely critical at that time for both of
Mm-hmm.
these teams because you could see 8 and 9 at this point with the winner being in and the loser being out.
Yeah.
So I would say GWS right now is the team I see getting in.
Mm-hmm.
I see the loser potentially of Port Sydney being the team that drops out just because I think Richmond and West Coast are starting to pick up at just the right time.
I would I would like to put a lot of weight into your take with Sydney and Port Adelaide. Probably the loser of that game very well might be the team that ends up missing it. With Sydney, I have a lot of faith in them to at least finish within the top eight. Port Adelaide, I don't have faith in that team, but I still think that somehow they're going to finish in the top eight just because they might be able to scrape together enough points against non-top eight teams to actually make it in, because that's just kind of seems what they're going to do right now. Richmond, I will never say no to them, just because more than likely you're going to be wrong. So for me, it actually is the West Coast Eagles, which I'm mostly worried by, or the team I like to point out mostly to be the one to miss it. And keep in mind, between these four teams that we're talking about, it's all razor thin margins, okay? There's not really like an obvious team that's going to drop out. There's not an obvious team that's going to stay in. But for West Coast, they are getting healthier, but they do have this tough stretch of games. They have this game coming up this round against the Western Bulldogs. Luckily for them, that is at Optus, but then they also have games against Sydney. They have games on the road against Adelaide. They got games on the road against Collingwood, because I now say Collingwood over the last two rounds because it looks like maybe they're. I just don't know what to think of Collingwood, so I'm just going to circle that game. They do have Melbourne in round 21. That is at Optus, but it could be the Demons playing. That's going to be a tough game to call. Can't wait till we have to do our tipping for that one. They have Frio at Optus, but technically this is going to be a weird game to pick because both teams play grid at Optus, but both teams are at Optus. Technically, Frio is the home team, so maybe they get the rub. I really don't know, but they also capped the season with the Brisbane Lions. So I see maybe 4 wins out of these last games for them. On the low end, it might be 3, and then for GWS, the way it looks is that I see a floor of a floor in these last 9 games of 4-5. Those games being Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Carlton, and Essendon. I see those games being wins, but where you might be able to get a little bit of leeway there is maybe the Sydney game, maybe the Port Adelaide game, and hell, maybe even that Richmond game. So I see a floor
Mm-hmm.
of 4-5, a ceiling of 6-3, 7-2. If you're being really optimistic about this team, so I think GWS, if everything goes bad for West Coast and everything goes well for GWS, it could be GWS hopping over the West Coast Eagles for a final spot, probably number 8. But
Well,
man, it's going to be
here's
really
the other thing.
interesting to see how this whole thing plays out.
Yeah, because here's the other thing. As I just went through it, and here's how I think where many people are pointing out. So Sydney plays Port Adelaide this week.
Mm-hmm.
Then they host West Coast,
Yep.
go down to Victoria for the Western Bulldogs, then get the GWS Giants. But their final run home, for a lot of people, they say is smooth sailing. After they play Frio after that, then the Essendon, and then their final 3 games are St Kilda, North Melbourne, Gold Coast. So if you're Sydney, you want to survive this 4 game set with Port, West Coast, Western, and GWS. If you can
Mm-hmm.
go 2-2 in this, it at least sets you up with 2 in between games of Frio and Essendon, which could go either way. Frio is at home. Essendon will be at Marvel Stadium as we speak currently. Again, we don't know how COVID's going to do, how that's going to go,
Right.
but you look at it there is if you get out of 2-2, so say hypothetically speaking, you lose this game of the Sydney loses this game of Port, beats West Coast, goes down to Marvel, loses to the Western Bulldogs, somehow squeak out a win against GWS. And for this is for hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
You go 2-2, you get 8 points out of it. Frio, you should be able to beat Frio at home if Frio is still having injury issues. Essendon down in Marvel, I think is kind of a 50-50. It's a coin flip. We'll be generous. We'll give Essendon. I think the final 3 games, St Kilda, North Melbourne, Gold Coast. I think North is really the only one that if you're a Sydney fan, you're a little worried about because it will be at Marvel Stadium. But I
Mm-hmm.
think St Kilda, Gold Coast, you should win. You should be able to beat North at that time. I think that could be massive. Winning at least 4 of your last 5, I think can get Sydney in. But again, it's this horror run of 4 for the next coming back from the bye.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Sydney, you will be wrapped if you're 2-2. You'll be ecstatic if you're 3-1. Like I think the Western Bulldogs is the only one you look at and you go, you're definitely that's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Port, I think you can go into Port and win because I think Port losing Gray is a tough one. Um, Going and playing West Coast at home for some weird reason they leave Optus Stadium and for some weird reason something goes nuts. I don't know what it is. And GWS, you've got all that momentum. The rosters are a little bit different. It'll kind of depend on what the pressure is like on GWS at the time,
Mm-hmm.
how their next couple of games go. So it's going to be a crazy next 5 or 6 rounds to see how this ladder is going to change. It is going to flip, and I cannot wait for it.
Ultimately, what I think it really comes down to is if you're if you're a GWS or if you're Essendon, you're going to have to hit your ceiling of wins over this last stretch of games, and you're going to have to hope that someone currently in the top 8 is going to have to hit their floor in terms of wins if you really want to jump it. It's a little bit play good, get lucky. And like you said, Tanya, we're going to have to wait and see how this one. But I'm super excited, and I do have a strong belief that my Giants can find a way to make it into the finals. Whether they're going to do anything with that, who knows? But it'd be nice to at least see them make it, especially after choking it away last season.